Hey, Mike, how are you? It is Thursday.
Yes, I'm doing swell. How you doing, Bob? How was that lacrosse concert of yours?
Well, so the thing is, uh, we are now. I am home. I'm in my office. This is my studio where I normally am. Um, but our flight home yesterday was very adventurous. The flight was canceled first, and so we rebooked to an earlier flight, which worked out great. And but the flight that we took was half full with a high school boys lacrosse team, and they were coming back from spring break. This team also had to do the amazing thing of the freshmen had to sing in front of everyone in the airport.
Why?
That's their hazing. And if they did not get an approval from the rest of the group, then they were going to have to sing in front of the entire school. So they wanted to do well.
Oh, jeez. Okay, fine. I think it's embarrassing enough just to be in high school. You don't need to hate anybody.
You would think so. You would think so.
I do think so. I mean,
All right.
most people I know would not want to repeat their high school experiences, maybe certain experiences. But overall, if you had to redo those 4 years, forget it. No way.
Right. I'm with you on that. So I want to talk about a couple of things. Our guest is going to be here for very shortly. We're going to have Lauren Hitzhusen, who is the senior editor of Maverick at Mad Cave. I am wearing. Look, Mad Cave sent me some swag, so I'm wearing it. And
I'm holding out for a kick.
well, that's fine. There was also a really cool notebook in it. So anyway, so they know how to get me. T-shirts and notebooks. I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk first and play a video that was reposted on TikTok that hit me, and I think it was very appropriate considering the horrible news of the day. So I'm going to play that first, and then we can talk about it.
Start putting the money back into the school system, pay the teachers what they're really worth, and this should happen all over the country because they just haven't spent the money to encourage people to learn and to make it okay to be smart. It hasn't been okay to be smart in the United States for centuries. Unless somebody in the media says, you know what, if we made it look like it was okay to have brains and still be an American, and that was an ideal thing to do, then maybe kids would be interested in learning. But instead of that, what they've done is they've made the schools poor, they've made them weak, they've paid the teachers a substandard salary, which means that the good ones took off and went to do something else because, who wants to put up with that kind of abuse, and who loses?
Right.
So those are the words of Frank Zappa from 1986.
Frank swings up very well.
I know, right? Well, he did.
He did, yes. I have respect and admiration for Mr. Zappa and have had that since about 1965.
I believe so.
And I've been quoting him incessantly, but quite frankly, over the last several months, I seem to be quoting him just about every day.
Mm-hmm.
Just about every day. Because he had a line in Concentration Moon, which is on We're Only in It for the Money, which is a brilliant concept album. And that line is I'm blocking on it now. Geez, don't get old, folks. Your memory drops dead.
Yeah.
Scab of a nation, driven insane. Now, that was a powerful statement when he made it in early 1968. Given, if you recall from your history books, what was going on in my life and our lives in 1968. Scab of a nation, driven insane. Yep, that makes sense. It makes so much more sense today.
Yeah.
So much more sense today.
one of the things that struck me about that quote from him was, talking about how, it has been the intent of a large, a continuing growing larger portion of um, people in power to make education less valuable or less important.
It
And
doesn't matter. Today we did away with it.
right, well, that is why we're talking about it. Yep, it is. Uh, it's interesting because as one of the things we talk about on this show a lot is, and we get excited about, is the concept of using the medium that we love, comic books, in schools and in education. How it has become a history textbook. It has become a textbook for life. It is a method of storytelling and exploring humanity and all of its roles, and educators, the people who are actually in there, have embraced it more than they ever have, and it continue to do so. And now we're in a situation where the funding for that is at risk, um, because there's now there are going to be different people looking at what goes into a school library, people who are much more parochial, which oftentimes in this country means uh, more conservative. Um, and It's disappointing. So I wanted to bring back Frank's words there.
I'm not, excuse me, disappointed in the least. I am way too livid to be disappointed. My anger ate up disappointment a long time ago, or what seems like a long time ago. It could have been last week. Every week now is like 2 months. Yeah, screw education, because it just makes kids uppity, and then they grow up to be uppity adults, and they expect stuff. When did they get rid of civics classes? It had to be at least a generation ago.
Yeah, I don't think I ever had a civics class.
Really? I'm such an idiot.
I mean, I had plenty of social studies classes, but I never had a
Right.
class called civics.
Well, yes, I know. I didn't either, quite frankly, but we had civics classes. It was just called, America or something. I don't know. But it doesn't matter because it's all irrelevant now.
Sure.
Like an idiot, I believed it when I was in school. I actually thought it was a promise. It's like in the Constitution. It's like part of what we do. It's part of who we are. It's a promise to kids who are in school. You actually will walk out knowing more than when you went in. Nowadays, you know less. You know less. You know more bullshit and less truth, less fact. And that's because we never, ever backed our teachers, our librarians. We have other categories, nursing, for example, where we just totally abuse people. I have friends and have had friends who are teachers. I've done a little bit of it myself on a sort of a guest basis. And people are not naturally motivated to learn on their own in a broad range of fields. If you're a comic book fan and you want to know who created Batman, fine, that's cool, and that's helpful. It's part of our cultural identity. But when you go to school and they say, well, no, actually we have 3 branches of government and they're interdependent and interlocked and they all watch each other's asses. That's all crap. That's bullshit. That's a lie. It was not the truth when they taught it to me, and it is so much a lie now.
Yeah.
So thanks for pushing that button.
Okay. I know. I'm sorry. It's important though. It's something we talk about a lot. It's something that
Yes,
is a large portion of it. We may be talking about student government later, based on our guest. Um,
that's true.
but
Actually,
so
this is a good segue
well,
in SquadCast. Yeah.
I'm gonna put a pin in that one. We're gonna come back because we got a couple things we want to get to before our guest.
Right.
She's ready, so we're gonna get to her very soon. But one of the things is we want to talk about very importantly is that whoever's watching and our guests, take advantage of getting involved in your local education department, school, state, county, whatever it is, whatever you can do, because those are the only people who are going to be making decisions going forward if what they're trying to do happens. We need to as a people take more control over it if they're not going to do it for us. If they're not going to legislate at a larger scale, we need to take it by the local roots and make sure that our children are learning, because we only get better if we teach.
There are so many problems in terms of getting education to work. And many of those problems are with the parents. Let's just assume that kids either like school or they don't like school. It's their prerogative either way. I liked certain classes. I hated other classes. I was mostly bored. But, now parents, and by now I mean the last couple generations, parents don't want their kids to go to a public school because stupid kids go to public school, so they'll drag my genius child down, which of course is complete total bullshit. And quite frankly, it's usually racist crap, because when they say, oh no, they'll drag my kids down, they are stupid, they're not referring to people who look like them, 9 times out of 10 to my experience. So a lack of education, a lack of an education system reinforces everything bad about humanity, and particularly humanity in America in the 21st century.
I can't argue with anything you say. I'm going to change the subject,
though. I get that a lot.
Only because we could go for 4 hours on this, and we got to get to our guest.
Absolutely, and we'll pepper this in.
Sure. I have a feeling we will come back to this later. Yeah. But we're talking about like learning and things, and I wanted to talk about, there's a new thing coming out that we just got announced today, and it's about history. Look, the history of the DC universe. Oh, wait a minute. This is what's happening.
Yeah.
This one had a great editor, I'll tell you that much.
Well, thank you. It was one of the most. First of all, I wasn't supposed to be the editor.
I understand. Second of all, so good.
It was one of the most impossible projects I worked on, only because Marva and Jordan, for whom I have the absolute highest respect and were perfectly cast for that book, they did it what we call Marvel style.
Sure.
So it's a textbook, really. So I'm not sure Marvel style really works that way.
Right.
On the other hand, DC needs to issue a new history of the DC universe every couple of months.
Well, Mark Waid is taking a shot at it. I mean, there's not very many people I would choose over him, if any, to take a shot at it. I'm interested. It'd probably be fun. I remember looking forward to the first version when it came out. There's a bunch of cool covers, I'll tell you that much, because this is a nice Chris Somney cover, but our good friend Scott Koblish is doing another imagine every character you can put on covers for it, and that's what's coming with that.
Let me insert. There should be a law, particularly at DC, but Marvel as well, and maybe everywhere, that if you are an artist and you are doing a group shot of 20 or 30,000 different characters, one of two things must happen. Either you have to follow John Buscema's rule of not putting two characters who have the same color costumes next to each other. And John did this beautiful Marvel piece with all the Marvel characters perfectly placed, so each one popped. It was beautiful. Or number two, you have to draw George Perez into it. He's got to be in there somewhere.
That's
and I think that should happen anyway.
I think that's fair enough. I mean, you can't tell the history of DC Universe without him.
You can't tell the history of American comics without him. And many, many other people. But when you're doing that group shot thing, you owe him.
I agree. All right. That is that. If I wasn't clear, that new series was just announced today or within the last day. Mark Waid is going to take a shot at the new history of DC Universe. With a bunch of different artists contributing, because nobody can do as George did and do the whole thing. So that should be fun. Thanks everybody for being here and listening to us ramble and rant about numerous things. Go back and rewatch the first 17 minutes so you can hear all of that. I want to bring in our guest. I'm very excited to have Lauren on the show tonight. We met at New York Comic Con last year. I am super intrigued by her enthusiasm for the medium. I think does an excellent job as senior editor of Maverick. And I want to bring her in before I gush too much.
That was such a sweet introduction. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi. That was such a sweet introduction. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's we like to kind of relive some of the things that our guests have done. Thanks so much for doing this. Your role as senior editor of Maverick, the Maverick line at Mad Cave. By the way, I am repping tonight. So.
Yay! I don't know if you've ever seen the custom bows made with.
Oh my goodness! See, that's perfect. That's excellent. Your role there is very important. It kind of like what we've kind of talked about, because it is aimed at growing people who are young adults or teenagers, and people who are learning and are looking for places to explore and learn about life. And how do you feel that Maverick's place in the marketplace is unique, and what is it you try to bring to it?
What is your mission? This is your mission statement time.
This is not Barry Maguire.
On a personal level, my mission is to make the comics that I didn't have when I was a young adult.
Good for you.
I want people to be, especially teenagers, to be introduced to the medium. And maybe you don't have an interest in superheroes, maybe you have an interest in something else, because to quote something that Amy Chu says often, it's a medium, not a genre. And I like expanding those offerings for people, especially for young adult readers. So that is my personal thing. Is I think of teenage me trying to figure out how to get into comics, and I think if something like Maverick had existed, I would have been drawn to it immediately. And I think that's something that really sets us apart, is that we are so focused on the young adult space, and we're being sure that we are showing kids from all different walks of life in the books. And I think that really sets us apart too.
Absolutely. What we've done in our journey in the comics business, over in the comics medium in America, is we created comics because it was too expensive to create more pulps. And comics were 10 cents for like 64 pages, and little kids could sit there and read their comic books and not bother their parents for a long, long time. And that was very, very useful. But after a while, since Americans always have to blame their children's faults on something else, it was comics' turn to get that rep. And due to the efforts of many people, including Frederick Wortham, who actually recanted all of that work, we were seen as an illiterate form of entertainment for illiterate people who will never get literate. We flash forward, 40 years, 30 years, and now all of a sudden I'm standing, and Bob knows this story. I'm standing at a American Booksellers Convention. Mark Evanier's book about Jack Kirby is being previewed. So this is a while ago, and they're handing out Kirby posters. So fanboy Mike is going like, Kirby poster, cool. And I stand in line. I don't stand in line for anything. Good for this. And the 2,000 people who were in line ahead of me were all teachers and librarians. Now, this didn't come as a shock. It came as evidence. We have moved on. It was a very defeatist attitude, because people would say, well, at least they're reading something. Okay, fine. Luckily, that's a transition. Finally, people realize we live in a very visual world. And visual communications needs to be taught, fostered, and quite frankly, elucidated. Is that a word?
I think so.
Well, it is now. And like any other communications form. So I'm thrilled, as Bob is, and he already said so it's my turn, at what you're doing. And I congratulate the folks at Mad Cave for doing so.
Thank you.
I want
I
to.
actually had I was going to say I had two comics as required reading in high school. I
Which
had
were?
Persepolis was required reading, and so was Watchmen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to talk about that. That's what I want. I want to talk a little bit about you. So what brought you into comics? You've been. When did you start reading comics? And was it in high school because of the required
It
reading?
was. Oh no, not because of required reading. I always joke that I got into comics very late, because I
Mhm.
feel like many of my fellow editors uh, learned to read off of comics, or had parents that were into comics.
Don't listen to
And
Mike. He talks too much.
and I basically woke up one morning, probably my junior year, and realized that I liked Batman. Like, I enjoyed the animated series, and I, enjoyed the movies that I saw. So why would I not just read the comics? Um, and that it was literally I just woke up one morning and decided to get into comics, and I absolutely fell in love with the medium right away. I spent my junior and senior year just reading, and and I remember I was reading some hardcover Batman that I'm sure is somewhere in the piles of books behind me, and I realized there was an editor credited in the book, and I was an editor for my literary, like, high school literary magazine, and I wondered how I could get into that and could not figure it out. And I kind of forgot about it, and then remembered it as I was graduating from college and went to grad school to pursue comics editorial. Um, and uh, really, really wanted an internship with Valiant, and I think I applied to that internship 6 times, and I never heard back. And I went to a convention and walked up to them and said, "Please, like, I've applied to your internship 6 times. I've never heard back. Like, can you just reject me?" And as it turns, and they gave me the direct email to talk to the guy who ran the internship program. And I emailed my application to him and I got accepted. And as it turns out, all of my applications prior to this one had gone to spam. They found all of them like 2 weeks after I started.
Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious.
It's also typical, which reaffirms every cynical bone in my body.
So I do want to talk about your time at Valiant.
Yeah.
Particularly, you were assistant editor on Faith,
Yes.
and Faith is very special in this house. My wife Sherry is a huge fan of Faith. So, working on that book, what was that like for you, particularly for that character and what you have? I mean, it's got to be really important.
Yeah. It was, I think, the first time, or like one of the first times that I ever saw someone that I felt like I could really relate to in comics. Um, because she was upbeat and funny, and she, you know, just like believed in herself and had friends, and I loved that. Like she felt like someone that
It's
I
you.
could be friends with.
It's you.
I just like I loved her so much, and getting to work on that book was so fun. 'Cause she's such a sweet character, and it was really exciting for me to be working on a female-led book, and I I just adored every minute working on that, and I got to work with the character more when I worked on Valiant High, um, which was great. I love Valiant High, but Faith was just such a magical experience, and I especially loved the Faithless arc. I
Mhm.
think that might be one of my favorite things that I've ever worked on because Jody Hauser created these fantastic villains for Faith. There's a talking cat. There's a guy in a bear suit. There's one of the villains is named Hollywood Chris, and he is like the missing Chris. So, like there's Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth and all the Chris's, and then there's this final Chris, and he is a villain. And I just was so tickled by that entire series. And it was one of those things that I really felt like I was in the right job when I was getting to help out on those books.
I'm a big fan of Faith as well. When I read her first appearance, and I really was able to kind of figure out what was going on, I enjoyed her as a character, and I enjoyed just about every aspect of her as a character. Fun person and a superhero. What the hell? But having had this sort of background in comics and in marketing, I immediately understood that this is a character and an event that can do a world of good by showing new readers that there's a place for them in our donut shop. Sorry, Bob, but it's true. And I think that in that sense, Faith is easily the most important character created over at Valiant and one of the most important characters created in American comics. So that's something else that I have in common with Sherry, Bob.
Yeah, see, exactly. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about, but since we talked about one of your early favorite things to work on, I'm going to talk about one of your current favorite things to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So, Princess Guinevere and the Jewel Riders. I want you to, if you can, share for our viewers and listeners. How did this come about for you at Mad Cave? Mad Cave has done a great job with a lot of the licensing products that they've done recently, and they've done a lot of things with taking cartoons and making them into comics. And so I know, love this very much. So tell us about it.
So we were asked to come up with licenses that we were interested in, and I I loved Princess Guinevere and the Jewel Riders when I was younger, and I thought to myself, I have not seen any media for this in years, literally since I was 5. And so I reached out to Mark Irwin and said, "Hey, is this something we can look into?" And he asked me to write basically a letter explaining what I would do with the property if we took it on. And the licensor 41 Entertainment was really excited to find out that we were interested, and they, agreed to work with us. And I, gosh, it was like an absolute dream come true when I found out it was happening, because I had the toys, and this was such a formative cartoon for me as a kid. And so I sat down and I thought about what I would want to see, what would like little me want to see. And so I was thinking about who my favorite villains were and what my favorite moments were, and how was I going to show the girls just a little older and wiser, so that they would be kind of more aged up a little bit. And we put together such an incredible team on this with Jordi Belair and Coy Carrion and Sarah Davidson on colors and Chaz Pangburn on letters. And it is going into it, we talked about how we wanted to be sure that it was still candy colored and magical. And that book really is so candy colored and so magical. It's
So, when you presented this to Jordy, how did that go? Because first of all, Jordi Belair is one of my favorite people making comics. I think she does everything fantastic. So, how did that go?
so Jordy and I worked together when I was at Valiant. We worked
Mhm.
on Britannia together,
Mhm.
which is if Princess Guinevere and the Jewel Riders had like an opposite entirely, I think it's Britannia.
And Peter's a little heavy.
And I reached out to Jordy, and I, you know, did the kind of, "Hey, it's been a minute. Do you want to work together again? I know that you're writing now. Is this something you'd be interested in?" And she mentioned how much she loved Sailor Moon and how much this reminded her of Sailor Moon. And she watched the first episode and was just delighted by it, because the pilot is pretty wild. As I feel like, early 90s cartoons kind of are. And she fell in love with the world like I did, and she had this vision for it. And I really think that her thoughts helped us take it one or two steps further into feeling more young adult, because the original target demographic is, I think, girls ages 6 to 9.
Mhm.
And I think that we did successfully bump it up in age. Um, but I would have no qualms like showing this book to its original target demographic. But we definitely do tackle some themes that Jordy presented, as we were talking about how we could age it up, that I think are really just so unique. Where we're talking about what is like duty versus what you want to do, and what if those two things aren't the same thing. As well as we talk a lot about forgiveness and how do you kind of come to terms with someone who really wronged you, um, which are very heavy topics, but
Sure.
they were all based on things that the show originally said that we took and we wanted to expand on. Um, yeah, it was so great getting to work with her again. She is just one of my absolute favorite people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The
So,
trick to doing a project like that, in my book, is you know who the target audience is, you know who the people are who are going to be there because they're familiar. How do you keep that audience and make it relevant to an expanded audience? And that can be a lot of fun. It's a hell of a task, but that can be a lot of fun. And the trick to it, the key to it, is to remember that it's a lot of fun.
The way we approached it was, the original cartoon is very late 80s and early 90s animation has a very distinct style. I feel like you can look at something like He-Man or Guinevere or King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, and you would know pretty much exactly when it was done, because that was what the animation looked like. And when we were approaching Guinevere and King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, we said, well, what does animation look like now? And animation definitely has more of an anime and manga influence to it now. And so that was something that we wanted to lean into. And I think it made it feel fresh and new. And while still, we didn't change anyone's uh, um, like uniform colors, so they're still immediately identifiable as the girls. It definitely feels like, to me, it feels like the show updated.
That's great. I'm glad that I'm so glad that you were able to do that and to bring it forward. I want to we have a question. I want to get to that because I want people to ask questions and let us know. Somebody wants to know about working on the Winx saga, and is there going to be a third volume, and what was that like? Because that is a property that is newer than some of the other things. And how was that in terms of having probably a more current audience?
It was a completely different experience because, like you said, it is so recent. With Guinevere, I'm looking at a show that aired 30 years ago, and there's a lot of nostalgia for. But with Fate, it's immediate memories of the show. And so we wanted to be sure that we were looking at where the show was now and working closely with our licensors to craft a story that fit within that world. I can't speak on any additional volumes, but I can say that we're all very, very proud of the books that we put out.
That's fair. That is fair.
What's your distribution like? What has your distribution been like? I mean, I realize that you, of course, sell into comic stores, those that remain, and hopefully you get into the bookstores. How much of your sales do you think went through bookstore as opposed to comic book store?
Oh goodness, I have no idea. I wish I knew. Like, sorry, I feel like that's a terrible answer.
No. It's an
I know
absolutely.
we're distributed through Simon and Schuster. I know that Maverick is unique because we very much are like we're book shaped.
Yes.
So yeah.
We're book shaped. I'm going to use that phrase. It's a great phrase.
So by that token, and kind of along those lines, how much interaction with readers have you been able to experience, and what is that like for you? Do you look at? Can you share some of that experience?
Yeah. Jumping back to Valiant, I met a Faith cosplayer once, and her boyfriend was dressed as Archer, and I went up to her and I was like, "You look amazing." And I was talking to her. I said, "I work on that book," and she said, "Thank you." And I was so kind of baffled by her saying thank you. So I'd gone over to tell her that I was excited to see her, but then she was excited to see me. And we were both just standing in the middle of the convention floor, just being excited that the other person existed, which was very great and very wholesome. I love getting to talk to people that have read the books. I have had the opportunity to talk to the Jewel Writers Archive, which is the fan club, about the books. I love the opportunity to hear what people think about them. One of my favorite shows is ALA and TLA, which are both librarian conventions.
Sure. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the librarians love telling me about the books and how the kids are responding to them, which it's great because it brings me back to I'm putting those books out there that I didn't have, and now these kids are having them, and I feel like I'm making the world a better place through comics.
There was a time before My Little Pony and Gem and all of that, where when the toy industry said, girls don't like this stuff.
That time lasted a long past that too.
But oh God, yes. But I'm thinking, doomed with this sense of history. Well, Archie Comics started in like 1941 and never stopped. never stopped. Romance comics stopped because, and I was part of that actually, although that wasn't my intention, because they were stupid. They didn't grow with the times. The Archie folks desperately tried to stay current with the times, and with a few minor exceptions, they've done an excellent job of that. The trick is to find your audience, look back at the audience that you could have had if you'd done it like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and see how you can get those people back in. That's the trick. And it used to be this, you couldn't get a black superhero published or on TV because the toy industry, which backstops the comics publishing efforts, the guys who run that said, "Oh, no, these are the people who steal the toys." So we have that level of racism and that level of sexism and that level of prejudice. And the beautiful thing about comics is, no, we just go out there and we're read by all kinds of people. We just have to open our eyes and look at them. We've always had women reading comics. Always. When we said that there weren't any, and that by we, I'm excluding myself, we had a huge female readership in like Star Trek and X-Men. There was always areas that attracted a broader audience that we could tell stories to, and lots of different types of stories. It just takes a warrior to go out there and change things. So congratulations, warrior.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, because we're about to go somewhere else. So go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that there are just so many amazing women in comics that I've had the privilege to meet and get to talk to, and I'm really, really honored to be part of that club because they're all very cool.
Sure, absolutely. I want to, this show, we don't talk about who beats who in a fight on this show. It's not what we do. And we're gonna go deep now, because this is something you and I talked about when we, in New York. And there's a thing that's happened in comics over the past decade where people went out, you included, and said, "Hey, there are comics for young women. There are comic books, stories, whether they're webtoon, whether they're other kinds of digital media, whether they're Maverick, whether they're some other DC's, YA stuff. There's plenty of content out there that is aimed for young women readers." And my question to you was, and still is, when those women get older and are now in their late 20s and 30s, where do they go? Where are the comics that are aimed? Because there's plenty of prose that is aimed directly towards adult women. Do we lose those readers to prose? Are there comics that can be aimed towards adult women in that way?
I definitely think there are, and that's something that I really hope that we can see more of. Um, I a webtoon continues to be really, really popular with women, even when they're no longer in the young adult category. That's something that I keep hearing, that webtoon is just such a force right now. I also really enjoyed the oh my gosh, I can remember her username, but not her real name. Give me a second. Yeah, I just blanked entirely
Are you
on
talking
her.
about Leanne?
No, I'm talking Josie Campbell.
Oh,
Josie
yes.
Campbell's Captain Captain Marvel was, I think, great.
Yeah.
Not Captain. Yeah, sorry, wrong name. But her the run that she had on that was just wonderful. The new champion of Shazam it felt like a little older than young adult, but it still had all this charm, and it felt, it was a book that I wish had come out when I was in college.
Hmm.
Um, so I'd love to see more of a move in that direction, and I'd love to see more books that were not quite being like, all right, we've dropped you off at the end of young adult, and your options are superhero comics or prose. Um,
Right, right, right.
I would love to see more expansion in that direction. Um, you know,
We tried to reach out to other audiences, which we didn't used to do. And I can get into stories about that. But we try to expand the audience by doing stories that would appeal to other groups that are not traditionally associated with reading comics. And that's good. The problem is that we should acknowledge the fact that everybody is reading comics and that our stories, our basic stories, most of our stories should be accessible and relatable to as many people as humanly possible. It can't be everybody, of course not. But yes, we should have some books that tell stories that certain groups might be more interested in because it speaks to them, and maybe we can do some educational work for people who are not part of that audience. And that's good. But if they want to sit back and just read a superhero comic, cool, it should work for them too. It's like, those people don't like this. Well, how the hell do you know? And by the way, when did you first believe that? Because maybe things have changed. And if not, maybe we should change them. And we have the power to change them. We, the creators and the catalytic people, editors are catalysts, we have that power.
I agree. I like your idea. I think that oh, hang on. Let's say hi to Joe. Hey Joe, glad you're watching.
Hey,
hi
Joe.
Joe.
Um, we're gonna talk about some other stuff too, but I think that the idea of keeping that audience, I think it's a valuable audience, and I worry. It's a concern of mine. I want more people to read, because the more people who read comics, the more people will tell other people to read comics. And when people stop reading comics, then they're not going to tell people to read comics, right? This is something that it's not you don't have it you can't turn on the television and see it. It's something that needs to be talked about, needs to be word of mouth. It's something that growing up in a comic shop, or going to the comic shop and talking to other people who are reading things like, what did you think of this? What did you think of that? That's how this medium grows. And when you have people stop reading because they feel
why
like
we have these damn conventions. I say damn because I'm going to them before any of you people were born.
Right.
But that's why we have the conventions. The original purpose was so that we could all get together and talk about the stuff that in those days you couldn't really talk about in public without being looked at like you were some sort of three-headed goon. And I still love that part about conventions. I don't do conventions that are multimedia affairs because that bores me. I want to go to where the people who love the medium that I love, and whatever it is that's directly associated with it, so we can talk about that stuff. I've never gone to a convention and come back without having learned something that made my work better.
That's awesome. I agree with you.
Not bad.
I want to I want to give you an opportunity to talk about something that's in stores right now, and that is student government.
Yay.
So we had Joe Eisma on the show, and we talked about it there. But it's now out.
Hang on. I'm sorry. I apologize for interrupting, but I'm compelled. Who designed that logo?
Oh goodness. It was. Give me just a second. I can pull up the name.
So
it was Tim Daniel.
Oh, Tim's great.
It's really, really nice. And I apologize, Bob, for interrupting you, but I got struck over the head with a wonderful logo.
It's okay.
It really is I love this cover so much. When we were talking about what we wanted the cover to be, we came up with a list of what we considered to be kind of images that were like a little patriotic. So we talked about the dollar bill, and we talked about the Statue of Liberty, and we talked about Mount Rushmore, and we talked about Washington crossing the Delaware. And Joe drew all of these sketches, and it was so hard to choose, but we landed on this one because I think you get such a feel for all of the characters just immediately off of this cover.
And it lends itself well to your color schemes, to a very nice, attractive color where everything pops. No, I like that. That's nice.
So when you have a book like this that's being how did this book did you ask Lila and Dave, do you have an idea? Was it something that how did this book come to being greenlit at Maverick?
So they sent it in as a creator-owned book, and I believe it was originally pitched as an adult graphic novel.
Right.
And when I read it, when I read the pitch, I thought that it had all the hallmarks of a young adult story. And I reached out and I said, hey, would y'all be open to making this a young adult story? And I talked about Parker, who's the main character in the middle right there. I talked about her growth that I saw in the pitch, and talked about how she had this really beautiful arc of self-discovery and figuring out who she was, and she really had this coming of age during the story. And they was very, very lucky that the team was willing to look at it that way, and they repositioned it for Maverick, and it was greenlit, and it was so much fun to work on. This script had me giggling out loud while I was reading it. Because everyone on the team is so funny.
I mean, but how much did you have to convince Joe to do another high school book?
Oh, Joe was, so this book, Joe was already attached to it.
Yeah, I know.
Oh.
I'm just messing.
I did no convincing.
He's gonna say, I don't know when the next student government's coming.
This book was so funny, and it's just, I love Parker so much. Like, I am not afraid to admit that I just, that girl, that main character, she's amazing. I think she definitely has a faith energy to her, but she's like a little bit Leslie Knope as well. And I think that's why I'm so kind of drawn to her as a character.
Sure, that's awesome. There's this really cool thing about, your role as an editor, where you get to see these stories and you get to see them grow. And I feel like you love that. I feel like that's one of the most rewarding things about what you do, because you, first of all, you get the secret, you get to know what's happening. But how I mean, it's like the perk, right? You get to read the stories before everybody else, and you get to fall in love with these characters, right?
Yeah, it feels, sometimes it could be a little frustrating being like a one-person fandom for a year before a book comes out.
Yes.
sitting there thinking about how excited I am about things, and I'm seeing art come in, and it's just me like by myself. I occasionally will, I'll show pages to my coworkers, but they haven't been living in the world of student government for the last year. They haven't been, looking at images of Halcyon Burke for a year. So I'm just showing them something out of context. I'm showing them a breakdancing turkey mascot. And yeah, that's a funny image on its own, but because I've been in that place for a year, it's a hoot and a half. And so on the one hand, I loved being a one woman fandom for a year, but on the other hand, it's so hard because it's just me by myself being really excited.
One of the things I enjoy about doing the SquadCast is I spent decades of my life being in that position, going to, let us say, conventions or store appearances or what have you, and people would enthusiastically want to know what's happening next. When is that going to come out? Are you going to do another one of these? Whatever. And yeah, that's the bane of my existence, but I really appreciate the enthusiasm and the desire that's behind it, and it's very rewarding if you worked on the stuff that they want to see more of. So, all of that is terrific. But now on the SquadCast, I'm on the other side.
Listen, we have plenty of things that we
know the dodges around those questions.
Sure.
That's why editors hate working with me as a writer or as a freelance editor or what have you, because, after a while we know not all the tricks, but enough to make us a real pain in the ass.
I want to talk a little bit about how Maverick works. For you guys, just for out there, how much of the books that you guys work on are something where you search for talent and said, hey, do you have an idea, or it comes to you some other way, or like is there an equal mix of that?
It's not really equal, and so
I'm not saying it should be. I'm just curious.
So I was one credit shy of a math major in college. So when you asked me that, I was sitting there like trying to do percentages.
I was not asking you to do math. There's no math required on this show.
It really is about 50-50. There are books where I have come up with the, kind of the core idea, and I've gone to a writer and it's work for hire or it's licensed. But with a book like Student Government, that came fully formed, basically. Right. There were character designs. The entire plot was written out. There were jokes in the pitch, and you got the vibe just immediately off of it. But it really is pretty much a 50-50 split. And each one of those, each experience is a little different. But at the end of the day, I just think that I'm making comics where we are putting something into the world that hasn't existed before.
Sure.
And it's very exciting. Sorry, I get so jazzed talking about comics and making comics.
No, you keep that up. Don't ever lose that. That is what keeps the paycheck coming in. If nothing else, it keeps the paycheck coming in. That enthusiasm is critical. You're not going to last very long fighting deadlines and fighting collaborators sometimes who will see things differently than you see them without that enthusiasm. That's what makes us really an interesting field. You go to a convention and the enthusiasm that the cosplayers have, and people who are up for weeks making their own costumes and designing their choreography and stuff, same enthusiasm that you have in front of your computer, that I have in front of my computer, that the artists and the writers have. It's all the same enthusiasm. So if you can fake that, you got a good job.
I don't.
The first time I saw the actual print copy of Guinevere was at the Houston Convention Comic Palooza. We did an event with the Houston Toy Museum to celebrate the launch of the book.
Mhm.
But the convention was before this event. Um, and I went over to their booth because I know the people who run it. They're very sweet. They're so cool. Highly recommend checking that museum out if you're ever in Houston. And I realized they had the book on display, and it was my first time seeing it in real life. And like seeing the book at a convention, and I already loved conventions. I I was on cloud nine. I was just over the moon with it. I have some very, very dorky photos of me like clutching the book in the middle of the aisle.
There's an analogous situation. Every once in a while, if you read an interview with like an old rock and roller back when rock was top 40 radio was around, a newcomer will tell you what it was like to inadvertently hear their song on the car radio as you're driving to pick up a loaf of bread. And I'm amazed more young musicians haven't just gotten into accidents because of that. But we have the same thing with conventions and those appearances or what have you, because we try to get product out to those shows or to those events, be they the comic books themselves or at least some preview pages or whatever it is, to keep that enthusiasm going. So yes, every time I see that, every time I experience that, it's like, oh, neat. It's neat. If you're knocking out widgets off of a machine and we need our widgets, I'm not putting that down. That's good work. I don't know if you get those types of experiences, and I'm so grateful that I work in a field where I do.
When I was at Valiant, I pitched a series of variant covers, the cat cosplay variant covers. And I worked really, really, really hard on those covers. And Cat Cosplay himself also worked very, very hard on these covers. It was just the two of us on phone calls and on emails talking about we were going to get this cat to wear a Roman helmet. And I walked into Midtown Comics and those covers were on display, like on the shelves, and people could buy them. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. I they were printed and real. It wasn't just the thing on my computer anymore. It was a real thing that people were buying. And then we did a potograph session with one of the cats at Emerald City, and then the cat was there, and it was even realer. And it was
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. The cool thing is you're at Midtown Comics and you're seeing your stuff up there. And, you've made it to Times Square. You're in the crossroads of American media. All the bright lights and the animation and all of that stuff. Or if you're at the other Midtown Comics back when you're over by Grand Central, same thing, 42nd Street. It's kind of amazing to realize that your stuff is part of that scene. This is like Guys and Dolls. Come on, give me a break.
it's just, and I know that what I feel is like probably a fraction of what artists and writers feel when their book is out there, because and it makes me so excited knowing that I'm getting to help someone put something out there that they've dreamed of. I know that the student government team has been working on this pitch for, I think, 10 years. They've wanted to do a book together for 10 years. And I got to be part of that. And that feels like such a huge honor to be included in something like that and to
Absolutely.
have helped make it a reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is. It is an honor. But only when you're done. When you got that first issue out, and you can look back and you can free yourself of all the stuff it took, all the hard work it took to get up to that point, and just enjoy it for what it is. My God, what a moment. What a moment.
You know, we spent a lot of time tonight, already talking about the readership and where it goes, and I just think having you here is important. I What is your goal? What is your hope for what you're doing currently at Maverick, and how do you think you can grow it in a way? What is it you're hoping that Maverick will eventually become forever? Like, what is its legacy?
What
Um,
should its legacy be?
I want. I'm trying to figure out where to start this sentence. When I first got into comics, I felt like I didn't see myself in them. Um, the women I saw didn't really look like me or act like me. Um, and I know that I am helping to create really, really relatable characters for teenagers. And so I think what I really want on a personal level is for readers to be able to pick up a book and feel like they're being seen and feel like they have a book that they can relate to, and maybe they're reading reading a Maverick book, and all of a sudden they come up with a solution to a problem that they're having. I know that's a very kind of romantic way of looking at it, but I was a library kid. I guess I'm a library adult too, and I definitely have books that really changed my life, and I hope that Maverick can make a book that changes someone's life, and they realize that they're just. I would love I would love to kind of have that impact on someone, for Maverick to have that impact on someone. And as Maverick continues to grow, I want to be sure that we are providing necessary representation in the marketplace. I want to be sure that we're telling lots and lots of different stories. When I think about Maverick as a whole, I'm thinking about kind of the books that we have out right now, the books that we have coming down the pipeline, and then I'm kind of doing all of this thought about what things are missing from all those books. And that kind of makes me very pointed in the things that I'm looking for. So I almost think of Maverick as this kind of like a tower of blocks that I'm constantly building. And I'm noticing that if I put something else over here, it'll grow taller and taller. Yeah, I view it as just an ever growing kind of organism of because it's a medium and not a genre. We can keep playing in other genres, and we can keep expanding and telling stories, because not every kid is going to want to read a slice of life book, um, and not every kid will want to read a horror book. And so I want to be sure that I have a wide variety of genres within my medium, and that's the
Well,
goal.
look at television, which is what they want you to do. But when we were enthralled with network television, they had prime time, which ran, arguably still runs, about 3 hours.
Arguably,
Arguably, yeah. About 3 hours a day, 7 days a week. And during that limited amount of time, they did westerns and crime shows and dramatic shows, and doctor shows, and a lot of doctor shows, and comedies and stupid comedies and incredibly stupid comedies. And together, they entertained the masses until we overloaded it and started to confuse people by charging them for everything. But we we are in one of the few media that can do that. We didn't for decades, because the only thing that sold for very, very long periods of time were superhero comics that were produced by two publishers. We had a little bit of this Archie action going on, and Harvey died a horrible, violent death with Casper screaming his lungs out. And, but overall, we can do anything. And that's the beauty of the comics medium. We can do anything. Now, with AI and CGI and all of this, you don't know what's real and what isn't. Well, here's the cool thing about comics. You know we're not real, even if we're telling the truth.
So
you got a story in your hand.
I want to come back to kind of what you were saying, and Joe had a point. He was curious about talking to librarians about the Maverick line. But so you talked about being at ALA and places like that and talking to librarians. What is the feedback that you're getting about the work that you guys are doing and putting in libraries?
Really, really positive feedback. It's I had a conversation about World Class, which came out before I joined the team, and I was explaining the book to a librarian, and she stopped me and she said, "No, no, 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 no. I have that book. I can't keep it on my shelf. It just keeps getting checked out. The wait list is a mile long. Like, kids just keep getting it." And that was so refreshing to hear. Like, we have a book that's that popular that people keep placing holds on it.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation at TLA where I was walking the librarian through things, and she stopped me and she said, "No, I'm familiar with you. What have you come out with since the last year?" Which threw me for a loop because I was like, "Oh gosh, hang on, what year is it now? What was
Right.
the last book you picked up? And let me try and move forward and also keep track of the things that I know haven't gone to print yet and the things that I can't tell you about yet. And I can point at some pictures back here." And the feedback has been so great with librarians, where librarians will ask me if we have if we have what books do you have that have asexual characters in it? Like, point at these titles, because they're looking for something particular, or they're looking for something a little spooky. They can get very granular with their requests, and I can talk about the Maverick line, and I can talk about the content within the Maverick line. And another favorite thing is that last year I got to go give a couple of talks at the Houston Public Library to students about comics as a career, and getting to make that connection with the Houston Public Library, as well as getting to talk to kids. I think they were all in middle school about, yes, comics is a real job, and there are lots of jobs within comics. Even if you wanted to be an accountant, you could theoretically work in comics in many different ways.
Absolutely.
And just, it was really exciting to get to have that conversation and get to work with librarians in that way. So I talked to a lot of librarians. I love librarians. I think they're great. And I really appreciate their passion for the Maverick line. We're headed to TLA in a couple of weeks, and I am just so psyched about it because it's just fun to get to talk to them and figure out kind of what their needs are and what they are looking for, and especially finding out how the Maverick books are doing in their libraries.
The whole COVID thing, which continues, totally destroyed my understanding of my place in the time-space continuum. So I may have the dates wrong, but it seems to me I had this conversation towards the beginning of the whole COVID lockdown about libraries, because the libraries were closed. That makes sense. And some of them had been sort of closed quite a bit because of budgetary concerns. It's like the New York Public Library is closed on Sunday. How can you do that? You can't do that. It's a library, But this was happening just as the YA books, in the broadest sense as it pertains to comics, was really taking off. And I was concerned that this could halt that action. It hasn't, and I'm really glad to see that. But my view of libraries is not, it's an old thing, we don't need them, we have the internet. Well, first of all, the internet lies. But beyond that, we have religion all over the place. Maybe too much, but that's my opinion. And we don't have to go to a church to be religious. We can be religious at home or anywhere we want. I don't need to go to a library to get a book, but I love being in that Book Cathedral. You know, it is an experience. It's the smells of it. I mean, you know, the little green shaded glass lamps. I mean, every part of it is a wonderful experience. I was lucky to grow up in an area that had a neighborhood public library, every single neighborhood in my city. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And of course, being in the comics field, I've been jealous as all hell. And you know, I wanted to get comics to expand to include people of all genders. I don't have a binary view of that. All races, all religions, all philosophies. You know, what we used to call people before we got really kind of tied up in our own identities too much. People. So thank you. You are doing the heavy lifting on that ancient fantasy of mine. And I truly appreciate that. I need to ask you, where are you from? We know your attitudes about comics and about your work and how you tend to approach it. I want to know a little bit more about Lauren. Where are you from?
I'm from Houston, Texas.
Mhm.
I grew up here, and then I did my undergrad in central Pennsylvania at a teeny tiny school with 1,200 people called Juniata, and I did grad school in the first part of my career in New York City.
Aha.
I did not realize when I
How did you
moved
get from
from
Houston to Juniata? Like that is
I
that is weird.
You have
I
to
read about
change
it in a
things.
book. What?
You read about it in a book and you said, "Let me go learn math in the middle of central Pennsylvania."
Yeah, I read about it in a book called 40 Colleges That Changed Lives.
Okay.
And
That's cool.
they didn't balk at the fact that I wanted to major in theater and math. They were like, yeah, go for it. And it was a small school, and I got to experience all of the seasons, which was
Mhm.
exciting.
Mhm.
Um, and when I went up there, I don't think I realized kind of the cultural impact the King of the Hill had. Because that was literally the first thing that everyone wanted to talk to me about. And to me, like, King of the Hill is a very neutral show, and it's full of jokes that are only funny if you're from Texas, like the constant conversation about Whataburger. Like, that's just part and parcel of being in Texas, is everyone is, on some level thinking about Whataburger. I didn't realize, because I had a conversation with a classmate. He said, "Oh, you're from Texas, like King of the Hill," and it threw me for such a loop.
Yeah, I got that as a kid. That's like, oh, you're from Mongo. How is Ming? Yeah, I get that.
That's funny. I went to Texas actually for the first time this past year, and I went to Whataburger mostly because of Joe. So there you go.
My favorite Whataburger item is the white chocolate raspberry shake. It's a limited time offering. I don't see it offered in 2025
All
yet.
right, all right.
Oh,
My fingers are super crossed. Another fun fact is, if you've seen the movie Rushmore, that's the school that I went to. It was Rushmore was filmed at the school I went to while I was attending.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, that's where Wes Anderson graduated from. Um,
that's it.
very hazy memories of there being a film crew around.
Well,
You went to school for as a theater major?
Yes.
You know, one of the little stunts I did in comics was I brought in actors, stage actors, I should point out, and writers, playwrights, to do comics. John Ostrander, Del Close, folks like that. And I did so for a couple of reasons. They knew how to tell stories. That's the first and foremost reason you'd ever hire anybody. But also, they understood blocking.
Yep.
And I thought that would be a really valuable skill to bring to comics, because the hardest part of a writer's job, a writer who's not an artist, is to think visually. Did you find your inclinations towards theater to help you in comics?
Yes, 100%. It helps me a lot when I'm looking at layouts or in final art. Um, my husband has been the second half of like fight scenes several times. I'm like, can you just stand there and I'm gonna figure out how my arm is moving here so I can go give a note. And God bless him, he will very patiently stand there while I'm going, okay, so my elbow needs to be higher. Thank you. And I will just like run back off to my computer to go send an email. And theater really puts you in kind of the physicality. And one of the things that when you're doing theater is you will write kind of these character exploration things. There are some great lists out there. And I think they translate over to writing for comics and just in general really well, where you get a complete view of a person as a character and you can figure out what that character's next actions are, like what makes sense. You're thinking about things like what is their favorite color? Do they have a favorite childhood memory? Um, I'm working on a book right now where the writer had mentioned that a character was wearing a watch, and I said, "Well, what kind of watch would this character wear?" And they responded with a very specific watch that they had found online because they had looked at it earlier
Right.
for the character work for the main character, and it was just so delightful. And it really does give you such a total view of who this person is, how they're going to react to things, what are their wants. In theater, they talk about the id, the ego, and the superego.
Mhm.
And I guess that's also psychology, but it came up in theater. As
Same
the
thing.
layers, as the layers of what your character's needs, wants, and desires are, and what they're willing to say, and what they're not willing to say, and then what's at the core. And I think those are really valuable things to think about as you're writing a character and as you're figuring out their physicality, because you want to note things like, oh yeah, they're saying this, but they're lying, and that needs to go into the panel description so we can see physically what does this character look like when they're lying.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really exciting question.
The first comic book I ever produced as an editor and, in this case, also publisher was for a very large and well-respected theater group in Chicago called the Organic Theater Company. Stuart Gordon was the director, produced such people as Joey Montaigne and Dennis Franz, and I could go on and on and on and on. It's a wonderful group. And John Ostrander, I should point out. And the idea of, it wasn't my first work in comics, it was my first work as an editor in comics, that it would be for a theater group. I didn't realize it at the time, but that's what inspired me to bring in those tools from the theater. The two greatest classes I'd ever taken in my life to prepare me for being an editor, storyteller, whatever the hell it is I am, were crisis intervention, and I helped set up a lot of crisis intervention programs in my youth social service work, and improv. And between those two, I think I can do anything. Or at least it'll seem like
You
it.
certainly tried.
I've done a lot, yeah.
I want to address. There's a question in the comments about Winx and Fate, and I know you've already said you can't really talk about where it comes from there. So I want Queen of Darkness, who has a question in the comments. Lauren's already kind of said that you can't really talk about it, but that seems to be something that you get a lot of feedback on. Is that fair with that particular series?
So the Winx fans are really, really passionate. This is a show that they care deeply about. And it's one of those situations where we talked about being a fan for a year in secret. And it's one of those things where it's like, I wish that I could share things, but I can't.
Sure.
Um,
No, that's
and
listen. We there. Mike and I talk about there are so many things, more things we know now that we can't talk about than ever. You know, that's kind of how it goes. But
Our last
I will say
squad
that
is going to be amazing.
good
Our last squadcast, we're going to reveal everything.
thing that's not on the schedule yet.
the passion that the Winx Fate fandom has for this book has just, and this series has just been so incredible to be a part of. And because this is a world that they care so deeply about, and it's been really fun to be a part of it. And it's been fun to work with Rainbow, who is the licensor, to help expand this world and work on it. All I can say is that you should please pick up book 2. And that's what I can say.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to leave that.
No,
person
and I
hanging.
appreciate it. The Winx Fate fans, I really appreciate the y'all's passion for this series. Um, it's 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 exciting to see people talking about something that you worked on.
We elicit passion from our audience, not towards us as individuals, which is usually a good idea, but because we want them back next month, or we want them to read the next book, or we want them to just continue reading something, So we stoke that enthusiasm, and you can't do it unless you're enthusiastic yourself. It's not the right mix. You want to get somebody all hyped up about what you're doing? Be hyped up about what you're doing. Just don't be an asshole, which is a struggle.
All right, we're gonna wrap up fairly soon, but I want to ask you a fangirl question. So, what is the comic book character that is your favorite comic book character that you have not worked on?
Thus, you immediately eliminated Faith and Flamingo just right off the bat.
Yep. What was the character that when you started, when you were a junior in high school and you're like, I need to do this? What was the thing that let you keep doing it? Because you could have picked up something that sucked.
So there were
and make
there
it good.
So the character as a whole, in terms of like all bits and pieces of her, was Zatanna.
Okay.
I thought she was so effortlessly cool. She did magic, and she had like a little bit of anxiety there that I really related to. And she just seemed so cool and like someone I wanted to be when I grew up. But off of single images that I saw that burned into my brain, where I saw Mary Marvel in a shot of like 100 people and latched onto her immediately. And then I saw the Amalgam Comics Green Lantern. And
Okay.
I thought that was such a cool character design. And of course, that character has like a series right now, which is amazing. And so those are the things. It was Zatanna. And I found as much Zatanna content as I could in high school, and there was not a lot. I think there was 7 Soldiers of Victory and just a handful of random comics that I could find at my Borders, because that was where I bought my comics.
she was created. First of all, she was created out of to be a female character. Maybe the fishnets confused you, but she was created to be a female character, and that's rare but not unheard of. She was created to be a female character who from day one had daddy issues, severe daddy issues. She had to find him. He was responsible for everything that she is, but so much more. That was the underlying quest. And it's still there. They still use that, and it's now 1,000 years later. I love Zatanna because she was not defined as a Superman from the very first issue. She was defined as sort of this wandering character who's putting her life together. And we overlook the fact that her quest was so realistic to our readers, of which I was one at that time. So and today. So I love Zatanna for a whole bunch of reasons. One of which is that she's a metaphor. If somebody is speaking gibberish, I can just ask them to translate from Zatanna speak.
It's funny because Zatanna was in the first comic that I remember reading, which was New Teen Titans #4. She was the in very many ways the antagonist. Like, don't believe Raven. That was the whole theory in that one was Raven's trying to trick you, which she was, but she didn't know. But it's I love that character. Absolutely love that character. I love that character for everything that she's done. I think she's grown. I think people have done so much great work with her over the last 15 years. I think Serinda Swan was a fantastic Zatanna. But yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I love that.
So if DC were to call you up tomorrow, and say, oh, look, we got this Zatanna thing, and we need somebody to really, mastermind her future. How long would it be before you're on a plane to California?
Listen, gosh, that would be rough. I think that as much as I would love to do that, I keep coming back to the stuff that I'm getting to do at Maverick. And this is just a quick story, but so my thesis in grad school, it's something that you have to turn in your thesis pitch the start of your second semester, and then you spend the entire next year working on it. And walking in day one of my first semester, I knew what I was doing, and I started doing research on it. And so this would have been fall of 2014 that I started doing research on an initiative for DC Comics to do an all-female team aimed at middle school girls, with a focus on STEM, where Zatanna would be a main character, and then I was going to get Lauren Foss to do the animation for webisodes on it. I was very specific about what I thought would be a good idea. And everyone knew I was working on this. And then my accounting professor said, "Hey, Lauren, have you seen this thing that DC announced?" And that meant that I had to stop my thesis research and do something else. I was like, oh, at least I had the same idea as this giant company.
Every writer has but that person did it while I was working on it. They got it out for the story.
It was so funny. I was like, well, I'm glad that I'm glad that someone else saw the value in the idea.
Well, which book are we talking about? Is it Mystic U?
Oh, it was the superhero girls.
Oh, the superhero.
That entire line. And I thought it was so I was so excited that existed, because when I had been working on my thesis, I was thinking, of course, of a younger me. Sure. Like, what would have gotten me into comics 5 or 6 years earlier? And this was kind of what I had been thinking about. And I was really glad that, obviously someone at DC had the same thought about how do we get kind of middle school age girls and younger interested in our properties.
There are 5 superhero girls Barbies on my wife's shelf right in front of me. So
I should point out that the woman who is the HBIC of Pop Culture Squad just received as a gift a pop, a Funko Pop modeled after her. Now, I didn't know that was
I saw that.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that was possible, mostly because I didn't think about it. But wow, so sooner or later somebody's going to do a custom comic about a real person paid for by that real person. I'm not going to work on that. But I think it's an interesting idea.
That's awesome. And that's a great story. I love that story. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We really, really had a wonderful time, and I'm so thankful that you're doing what you're doing. I'm so thankful that you're in this industry, and that I'm looking forward to all the amazing things you're going to make going
Thank
forward.
you. And it
It
really
is,
means a lot to me that y'all have invited me onto the show, and it was really great to connect at New York Comic Con. I love New York Comic Con. I'm exhausted by the end of it, but I feel so like
yeah,
alive the entire time.
yeah, yeah.
I feel
I
like you need to. I feel like you need to though. You need to craft a Zatanna dress for next year's New York Comic Con. I think you
That
need to
would,
do that.
yeah.
I think I'll be waiting for that.
I,
I
really
have this collection of dresses that I wear to conventions that I think
Yes,
have kind
and
of
they're
become like
fantastic.
my hallmark. Um,
I appreciate your efforts and I appreciate your diligence. But when I talk with you and a handful of others who are doing what you do, uh, I know that there's hope for this medium. And sometimes it looks like there isn't. And I learned how to read off of comics. So when I was very young. So my love for the medium is very deep, very personal. And I know that it has a good future in the hands of some really good people. Thank you, Lauren.
thank you so much.
Thanks very much for being here, Lauren.
Yeah,
We
thank you.
appreciate it. All right. We have Tuesday coming up.
We have Tuesday
On
coming
Tuesday-
up. Aaron Cooter is going to be on the show on Tuesday. He is an artist who works a lot for Marvel and some other companies. We are going to talk about his work. We're going to talk about what he's working on, what he has done. We talk about just making comics and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Well, Tuesday is going to be an important day for Fanboy Mike
Okay.
because Clover Press has printed the last three of their magnificent Terry and the Pirates reprint series. God damn, these are beautiful books. And there's like 13 of them. And the last three, which are like 9, 10, 11, and 12, because 13 was already published. It's comics. UPS says my shipment will arrive on Tuesday.
Okay.
So if it arrives late, I may not be here.
Well, that's fair. Okay. I just need to let people know, because we need to keep doing this, because this is the way things go, that in two weeks or so, Ithacon 48 is going to be happening. So
yeah,
please remember that if you're going to be anywhere in the Northeast and you want to go spend some time in a beautiful valley, we're going to be at Ithacon. I got some news about some of the panels. We'll probably next week we'll talk about some actual details about what's going to happen. But do that. Stay tuned to popculturesquad.com and all of our socials so you can see what's coming up, what we're talking about. There's been a lot of really cool stuff going on. So thanks for being here.
I point out that a few of us on one particular panel at Ithaca have been conspiring about how we're going to handle a particular panel.
Well,
this includes Dean Hansel and Walter Simonson and Don Simpson. And I don't think we're going to get arrested, but in these days, you never know.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to have to sneak out and make sure I get to that panel. In the meantime, we will be here on Tuesday night, March 25th, with Aaron Cooter, and whatever else we can figure out and whatever other trouble we can get into. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for spending your evening with us, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, folks. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Take it easy.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?